Morning everybody, Phil Henry here from Capricornia Chamber of Commerce. As we've been foreshadowing for the last couple of weeks, we're going to be doing interviews with the candidates for the forthcoming state election for the seats of Rockhampton and Keppel. We've reached out to the candidates, and those interviews that we'll be posting are from those candidates who have got back to us and agreed to do the interview. Each of those candidates will have been given their questions a day in advance. There are 6 questions and they get 2 minutes to answer, and we'll be giving them a little bit of a nod as they're coming to the end of their time. They'll also get a minute at the end just to do a wrap up if they want to do. So without further ado, on to the candidates. So today we've got with us Barry O'Rourke, sitting Labor member for the seat of Rockhampton. Welcome, Barry.
Yep.
Thanks for coming along. You've had some questions there, so what I'll do, I'll read them out. We'll just go through them.
Yep.
You happy to start?
Yes.
Terrific. Okay, well, first one. It's been traditional for parties to identify their priorities for the first 100 days in office. What are your priorities, Barry?
Look, my top priority, as has always been the case, is actually about supporting local jobs and creating jobs. And to be able to build more jobs into the region, that's about supporting local businesses and coming from there. And now is the time when we need our small businesses in particular the most. Since I was elected in 2017, I've always been fighting for Rocky, and I've had the runs on the board for quite a few projects that I've managed to secure funding for. Whether that's Rookwood Weir, for example, or Brown Park Stage 1. We've got the upgrade of Laurie Street, which I'm really pleased about. That $35 million there to duplicate Laurie Street and the bridge there, and just to take that congestion out of Gracemere, which would be good. Other road projects like Northern Access Road, the duplication of the Capricorn Highway, and of course the Rocky Ring Road, which are all really important. Now, with all those projects, there's the flow on into our community. It's creating jobs, but it's also supporting, accommodation, meal providers, all those other things as well. So it's really, really quite broad. And then when we had, the COVID stuff, that really hurt our community and our small businesses. So the Palaszczuk government came out with a number of incentives to help our small businesses. Like for example, there was the $150,000 interest-free loan. The adaptation grants, our back to work program. So, there's lots of jobs there and lots of projects. And with the adaptation grants, there was some 200 businesses that were able to get funding for that, some $1.7 million.
Okay, thanks very much, Barry. Look, we'll move on to the next one. I'll read this out. There's a bit of detail in it. Yep. So as identified by Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland and the Capricornia Chamber, a business-friendly environment is a key prerequisite for a healthy small business economy. One major concern, though, for regional businesses is the number of institutional barriers in place that prevent local businesses from being given fair and equitable access, particularly to major projects. Many government departments have both published regulations, but of more concern, opaque and discretionary decision-making that act as barriers. So given the high number of construction and infrastructure projects on the go at the moment in this region, what would you do to fix this issue?
Well, look, collaboration with industry is key. And I've always worked by an open door policy, so any business can come and see me. I know that there has been concerns raised by a few of the businesses around the buy local stuff. So have fed that up to try and get those definitions in place. So the Palaszczuk government has delivered, our Buy Queensland approach for local procurement for regional Queensland, and that's our top priority in creating those jobs. So this means that local businesses get priority when it comes to government agencies, government-owned corporations and statutory bodies. And there's leeway actually in the tendering process too. They can actually, a local business can be slightly more expensive depending on their contribution to the community in comparison to a company down south. So we've also listened to the business communities to ensure that the procurement strategy supports small business and making sure we're seeking out those local local construction companies, for example. My history in housing. Well, now when we're actually going in to do a procurement, whether it's for repairs or maintenance or new construction, we actually seek out local businesses to actually come into that tender process. So, it is really important, and, to have that sort of very much whole of government supply chain come into effect much much greater. And I think that's one of the priorities that we need to really be focusing on, just to try and be supporting all of our local businesses in that process. So.
As we're talking about projects, we might move on to the next question. So it's always a bit of a big focus. So what are your infrastructure priorities for the Capricornia region?
Well, probably the most important is getting Rookwood Weir finished. Right, that is one of the key ones, because it's not just the jobs now, but it's also that long-term jobs in the agricultural sector, whether that's feedlot or intense cropping or whatever it is. So, that is really, really important that we get that happening, get that construction happening. As people would know, we'd been doing all the roadworks, bridges, etc., that had to be done before you can actually start the weir itself. Also, I have a really strong commitment to the Made in Queensland stuff, which is really important for our local businesses. There's been a few that have received funding under that, Capricorn Sandstone, Doblinson Springs, Granular Productions. Now, for those companies, with that advancement in that technology for them, they're actually able to increase more staff, the number of staff, but at the same time increasing production, sometimes sevenfold on what they were previously doing. So making sure that we're getting manufacturing here in central Queensland is another really high priority for me as well. And in the longer term, I think there is so many options around our airport. That's one of the big ones for me as well, is that, we can land the largest planes in the world at that airport, and wouldn't it be great if we could be distributing to Singapore, our sister company, and be doing that direct export to that. When we're building our agricultural sector, there's just so many great options there. It could even be the exporting of live fish. There's just so much in that space, which is really important. And I think that's where we're going to make a difference.
Thanks very much, Barry. So next question about power. Availability of sufficient affordable baseload power while reducing net emissions from energy sources is a key component of economic sustainability. So what's your view of that objective, and how would you achieve it?
And look, I want to be really clear on this. There is the balance of coal-fired power stations and renewables. And it is really important that in that we're still creating the jobs. With our electricity supply, we've been facilitating brokerage, I suppose, between, say, Clark Creek Wind Farm and Stanwell, to be able to sell those electricity products, so to actually keep prices down. We'll currently in Queensland, we actually have the cheapest electricity on the eastern seaboard. When you compare to the southern states, they're some 20-30% dearer than us. Now, the reason why we're able to keep that downward pressure and actually giving back rebates is because we actually own the assets. And that's the real key part of this one. We have the targets of, 50% renewables by 2030, and we're on track. There's some really great initiatives out there where we're working with private businesses and the electricity corporation, so that's going really well. The other really good thing for us in regional Queensland is a lot of people don't realise the subsidy that goes in it from the state government. It's about $500 million a year. Now, what happens is down in the southeast corner, where they have multiple players in the electricity industry, they work out the average of those costs, and then that's what it's subsidised for regional Queensland. So for regional Queensland, we're paying the same amount as that in the southeast corner, and it really comes back to the fact that we own the assets, and that's the important part.
It's become apparent in recent years that the education and skills system, particularly in relation to apprenticeships, has failed to keep pace with the needs of business and industry. What would you do to rectify this situation in this region?
Yeah, and look, that's a really good question, and it's something I'm absolutely passionate about. And I really do want people of Central Queensland and Rockhampton to be able to access, world-leading training, technology. So, and just last week, the Palaszczuk Labor government announced the $8.4 million to deliver the new Central Queensland TAFE Centre of Excellence, which is a really positive step for us. And look, it will actually be beside the $2.8 million high-tech training unit that we provide funding for, and also the $10 million manufacturing hub. So they're all located out there at the university. There is so much opportunity in the synergies in this area. So you'll be able to do anything from a traineeship through to a PhD, across whatever areas it is. So it is really important that we create those opportunities, and by funding that Centre of Excellence, that's a positive step there. We need to also remember, under the LNP government, they actually really cut TAFE to pieces. They took out $170 million out of its funding and sacked some 1,700 workers. Now, the impact that had on our Central Queensland community was just terrible. We just can't afford to go back to those sorts of days, So from a Labor perspective, over the last 5 years, we've invested $150 million into our TAFEs. And we've now put up another $100 million to support our TAFE industries through refurbishments, etc. So it is really important that we support all our training industries, and making sure that we do provide world-class training, and that's essential, and that's what we're doing. That's what Labor is doing.
Okay, Barry, so the last question here, particularly since the onset of COVID-19, but also reflecting the global marketplace, businesses need to better understand the digital online world, but also have access to stable, high-speed internet. So what are your policies to help local business both understand e-commerce and to get high-speed internet?
Look, that's a great question, and I know that we'll have people here watching this either locally or in regional Queensland. So I know the challenges that are out there in that technology speed in particular. So, one of the things that was as a consequence of COVID-19 was the adaptation grants that we actually gave out, up to $10,000. Now, there was 200 organised, about 200 businesses used those funds. And then when I went out and actually was chatting to a lot of them, they were talking about how they'd made huge advancements in their technology space, and whether it was doing online food orders or upgrading their Facebook, all that, their website, all those sorts of things. That's where the future is. There's no question about that, and it is good that we're able to actually provide that funding to actually help them transition. And look, I know that there is other funding that comes out from the council through us and things like that to actually help businesses access training in that space, and it is the future. We've got no choice. We've just got to invest in that. So yeah, one of the side consequences of COVID actually did put a lot of dollars into the sector to actually look at advanced technology in those spaces. So as far as speed, that's probably a federal government issue more than a state, and it's something that I think we've all been a little bit concerned about, but there has been improvements in that space in recent times. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks for those responses there, Barry. Now we'd like to give you another minute just to summarise your claims for election for this forthcoming election.
Well, firstly, look, thanks for the opportunity just to have a chat around these very, very important issues that you brought up. Well, I think as a community we've actually done an incredible job around the COVID health crisis. And we're fortunate that we're in a fairly good position, particularly to our southern states. That we're implementing our COVID recovery plan, which is where we're seeing a lot of businesses really benefiting. Look, I've still got a lot more work I want to do in that area. There's no question about that. I'd love to be re-elected come 31st of October. But I do have a good track record. I've been someone that's just got on with the job of just delivering. There's been multi-millions invested into Central Queensland, and I'm very proud to have been involved in that process in getting those dollars together.